thank you all for checking out this week's episode. Once again, I'm John. If you like what you heard and saw today, subscribe to our YouTube channel, find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and check out our brand new merch store with hats, coffee mugs, t-shirts, other cool stuff coming down the pipeline. Again, thank you all for support. Be safe, and see you next week.
How's it going, everyone? John here, the host of Spear Talk, and today we get to welcome Timbersports athlete and lumberjack podcaster Turbo Tom Lancaster to the show. Tom, great to have you on here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it, man.
I know as I kind of, before we hit record, I was telling you about why I want to reach out, but I remember as a kid, when my parents, they'd go to bed, and after Saturday Night Live was over, I'd keep staying up TV watching stupid B movies. But as I got older, I transitioned to like watching ESPN2 late night, which was Pete Weber screaming at kids bowling, or Michelle Lee, the Black Widow pool. But it was more of the strongman competitions, or the lumberjack sports, where I was just enthralled by that. These are, when you look at athletes, people always like the top five, right? Football, baseball, soccer, I mean, whatever. And for me, I love the obscurity of some of these athletes and men and women that do stuff like you do, that sure, it's not mainstream baseball or shooting a hoop, but these people are top fitness people. And to get to talk to you today about it's actually pretty surreal for me.
Yeah, man. It's it used to be televised a lot more back in the day. But yeah, that's when I talk to people that are asking them if they've ever seen it before. That's usually what they say, like late night ESPN2 or whatever back in the day. Yeah. The Great Outdoor Games was a big competition that used to be aired a lot. And then of course the Steel Series, which is the only one that's still televised. But yeah, even the Lumberjack World Championships in my hometown of Hayward, way back in the day, I mean, was on like ABC Worldwide of Sports back in the 80s and stuff. And unfortunately, that's not aired on television anymore. But hopefully, it comes back around.
It's one of those things too, like when we go to like the county fairs and stuff, it was either like the Highland game type stuff where you'd see like people throw axes or throw beer kegs that would look like a mile into the air. Yeah. But they always do the biggest crowds. And it's like, I'm always fascinated because I think people are amazed that a human being can spin really fast on a log in the water, or speed climb up a telephone pole that seems like it doesn't end, or saw that quickly. It's just, I don't know. Like for me, it's, especially after the pandemic, it's like all this other bullshit that went on TV or social media. It's like, I'm glad that I was able to, when I spent time on TikTok, to find someone like you. And I think the two people I follow and look at the most are both either shirtless dudes with axes or someone like you is competing. And it's like, there's just something cool to it.
Yeah. No, I appreciate it. It's definitely a unique sport. And when people finally get to see it in person, they always really enjoy it. You mentioned seeing them at like fairs and carnival, festivals like that. I spent a good portion of my career just working for a traveling lumberjack show, and we would travel to state fairs and conventions and stuff like that. And always draws a big crowd, and people always enjoy themselves for sure.
You mentioned Steel, the Steel Series when you travel with them, but when it comes to like sponsorships, is that part of the problem that it's tough for someone outside of, say, a chainsaw company or a mechanic company to sponsor you? Like, how come Red Bull isn't involved, or like other companies like that seem like guys that do, or lumberjacks? Why isn't Slim Jim involved? Like, it just seems for me like it seems endless ways for marketability for people that not many people could do what you do. Yeah.
So, for one, it's just a very unknown sport. Unfortunately, I mean, there's a lot of people that have heard of it, or maybe seen it once or twice, but they still don't really know what it's about. Now, that being said, there is Red Bull is sponsoring one athlete, and he's one of the best in the world, and he has been for many years. But I guess that's kind of where we're at. I will say, even before I started on my social media stuff, that there's only a few guys that are really dominating the sport throughout the world, maybe a handful of guys that are really making a living as a professional athlete. Just because there's not a whole lot of money in it unless you are winning. So it's hard to it's kind of hard to explain, but if you're not one of those top athletes, it's hard to dedicate your whole life to the sport. The money's just not there. Even for me, as a professional athlete. When I compete, it's hard for me to make good money in the sport. As a speed climber, there's only like 5 speed climbing competitions. So just as a speed climber, that's kind of out of the questions. To really make a living as a professional athlete, you got to dominate in the chopping and sawing events, which is where most of the big money is. And it just takes a long time to get to that point. But yeah, so there's a couple athletes that do well, and Red Bull has been sponsoring this one athlete for quite a few years now. But yeah, I agree. There's a endless marketability for this sport, and I kind of starting to claw my way into that world and figure out how to. I've been on the mission to figure out how to make money as a timber sport athlete. Outside of working for a lumberjack show, which I can explain a little further if you need me to.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It's to your point though, with social media like TikTok, I found your page and I was just blown away because it's cool how you're able to not only showcase what exactly each event is, but like your ups and downs, the good days, the bad days. And I think that's something there that's super relatable, because I think it's like, how do you do you feel it's on your shoulders to be one of these athletes in a what some would say a very obscure sport, to not only do the physical aspect of it, but the mental games you have to play to help push your brand, whether it's individual or the actual sport itself?
Yeah. So, I'm really the only one that's me and one other guy have really the only ones that have pushed the social media. So it's kind of all new to us. And yeah, I mean, it's just kind of, for me, it started out just getting exposure for the sport. And now it's just kind of trying to explain to people in detail what it takes to be a top athlete. I think for me, getting that point across to people that it's more than just someone in their backyard splitting firewood. A lot of people think they're like, oh, I grew up doing that. Like, well, it's a little different when you're competing professionally. So I think for me, that's a big part of it is explaining and really getting it through to people what it takes to be a top athlete in the sport, or even a top 24 athlete in the nation, not even in the world, just to be ranked top 24 in America. And which is what you had to do to be part of the Steel Timbersports series. So that's kind of like an elite group. It's the top 24 in the nation right now. And even to do that, there's not only a lot of money, a lot of time, the mental game, like you said, but yeah, it's just a lot and there's a lot of events. It's not just like, that's the thing about the sport too, is you're not just training kind of one aspect of it. You got to, if you want to be dominant in the sport, you got to train for each event and make time to get yourself ready physically, but also do the event training for the technique of each event, each individual event. So it's a lot.
When did this hobby become something that you do now? Like, at what point were you kind of like, holy shit, like this could be something I could do good at and take over the country and stuff?
So I got my start in Hayward, Wisconsin, where I went to high school, and that is the home of the Lumberjack World Championships. So that's one event that happens one weekend every year. It's been happening, I think they're on like 65 years that's been the home of the Lumberjack World Championships. And but during the summer months, obviously that's just one weekend a year, but during the summer months at that same location, there was people that started a lumberjack show, and they did lumberjack shows every day of the summer, Memorial Day to Labor Day, for the tourists in the area. And basically what a lumberjack show is a mock competition. So we sell tickets for an audience to come and watch the show. We put up a mock competition. We split the crowd into two sides. They cheer for their lumberjack or lumberjacks, and they boo and heckle the other one, and we get the crowd rowdy and getting involved. And there's some other, and then we'll go like head to head in like 12 different events. And there's also some dialogue and some comedy and stuff like that. So that's how I got involved in it, and as like a summer gig. And they hire, well, depending on what show, there's multiple shows now throughout the country, but basically like that one, they hired high school kids that were athletic. I was like 16 years old, and I got taught how to get my way through a block. I was trained to chop and saw and climb and log roll in a couple weeks, and I was kind of thrown into a show. So it was pretty rough start. but it wasn't for a professional competition. So I just kind of had to be good enough to perform in the show. Now from there, with all the resources to train in all the events, a lot of people from there will transition into competing professionally. For me, and that's exactly what I did. But again, because it's so hard to make money just strictly competing, I've made most of my living working for lumberjack shows around the country, whether it's permanent show sites or that mobile, like a mobile operation at fairs and festivals and conventions. So that's kind of what got me hooked into the sport. That's what really how I fell in love with the sport, and how I kind of decided that I'm going to be involved in this sport in some way, shape, or form for the rest of my life. But of course, it did start to evolve into I want to be one of the best timber sport athletes in the world. And now I'm kind of, like I said, clawing my way to the top. As a speed climber, I've kind of established myself as one of the best speed climbers. I still have some goals I want to reach in that sport. If I can kind of get through some recovery from surgery I just had. But as the chopper and sawyer, there's just a lot of equipment that needs to be acquired, a lot of time traveling, competing, and I'm just kind of clawing my way up that ladder at the moment, really. So
as it comes to the specific events, I kind of want to talk about a couple of them. But when it comes to your gear, how is a saw or a axe? How are they picked? Is it something that's everyone has the same equipment, or does it can be a different company but the same type of thickness or weight? Like, how does that all work?
So basically there's not really any regulations in the chopping events, because there's not like an advantage of having a bigger, heavier axe. If you can swing it, good for you. But I mean, even recently, I mean, I've kind of discovered that I don't need the biggest axe. Honestly, I might be able to chop more efficiently with a smaller axe. It's like where the advantages come is acquiring that equipment, because each axe is like $500-$600. And I mean, you think you would go there with one or two axes. I mean, but the best in the world are showing up with 24 axes.
Wow.
And not only that, but they're training with axes that most people would think are competition axes. They're phenomenal, you know what I mean? So I think that's what kind of where I struggled, and because as a speed climber, you get like $300-$400 into some equipment, and you got your speed climbing equipment forever, and it lasts for years. But starting off young, wasn't really in the mindset of competing professionally, just because it was so overwhelming. So I kind of just, honestly, the first maybe even 10 years of my career, I didn't take the care of my axes very seriously and stuff like that. So I've noticed in the last 5 years now that I've really tried to, like I said, gain rank in the chopping and sawing world, that's where people are gaining advantages is knowing their equipment. For one, acquiring it, putting money into the sport, having having the best cutting axes, the best cutting single buck saws, the best hot saws, all that stuff is really going to kind of make that separation between the top athletes and not. And so when you have not only, a few axes that are good enough to train with, but then, I got a half a dozen good axes now that I only save for competition, or I'll maybe swing them in if I have some really good wood. But yeah, I mean, I'm still waiting I'm finally getting my first competition single buck saw. I had another one a while back, but it's a training saw now. So like I finally have a legit single buck saw. So for a lot of guys, we actually end up borrowing equipment at first, because it's just like, for one, it's like the single buck saws, a couple $1,000s.
Oh, wow.
And not only that, but I ordered mine last year. So sometimes even when you are ready to make that big commitment, you're still going to wait. Sometimes it's been a couple years people have waited for saws. So then you got to borrow equipment and stuff like that. So that's the equipment is knowing your equipment, and for one, getting the equipment and knowing it, and then knowing how to maintain it. And then, having relationships with people
right
that will potentially maybe fix or sharpen your saw in timely matter, because there's not that many guys that do it. So sometimes these guys get overwhelmed with orders. and who's, it's nice if you're closer with those people. You might get pushed up the list. So yeah, so as far as regulation and stuff like that in competitions, I don't think I don't think there's a I don't think there's any regulation in the axes. I mean, I'm trying to think if there's like a real simple one, but basically no. Because as far as length of handle, there shouldn't be, because there's no advantage of having a longer handle or whatever, a shorter
Right.
handle. For the axe throwing event, that's not really that's not a Steel Series event, but there's a limit on that. You can only have your axe handle a certain length, but for chopping, no.
I love that it comes off as very barbaric. And like when you watch the videos of the men and women that do this, it's just like it's so pure, the fact that it's just going to come down to the individual and what handle works good in his hand or the weight. And it's just, I love that you look at some of these other sports, it's like, I mean, I like, do they even PED test? Are you like, do they check any of that stuff in lumberjack timber sports?
Like drug testing, like
Yeah.
no.
Right. So it's like I kind of like the fact that it's just this is the Wild West, and I love how awesome that is, where it's like literally warriors just throwing stuff and cutting stuff up.
Yeah. It's funny because it's been around for like 100 years, but like I feel like there's so much more room for growth. Like it kind of peaked at one point and kind of just maintained that, and now like honestly, I feel like someone that can be the kind of movement to take it to the next level and get more money involved and have more access to the sport. It's like where do you, for me, I know, but like for you, like where would you go to train for this? You wouldn't even.
I mean, the only places I go to is if you get a pitcher of beer and you throw axes, like those axe places. But to your point, that's one step closer, where it's like not making this mainstream, but it's like, hey, I get to the number of times where I'm a day off in town with a client or something. Like, what do you want to do? Go to the movies? Want to go bowling? Let's go throw axes. And we'll spend 5 hours there laughing. And the instructor's trying to teach you how to throw it and stuff. And I've had friends that are professional knife throwers and stuff like that, top of the line. And it's just like, I find super joy in this because I'm not good at it per se, but I love learning about the intricacies of how to throw an axe or how to grip it. And like if you like get your sport out there, like that seems like a great avenue just to be like tour those places. Or I know there's a chain, I can't think of the name of it, that does these in like the Midwest. There's like 7 or 8 of them, but it's like that seems like a cool way to be like, oh, we're bringing in Turbo Tom to celebrity guest judge some axe throwing. Or it's like it's
sure.
I'm glad that stuff is out there. But to your like do back to what we said before, how do we get this on at 8 p.m.? Like you have people doing like these puzzle games or like these weird like human origami things on ABC at 8 o'clock on a Thursday. Why can't we watch men and women cut wood or axe throw or stuff like that, where it's like it'd be actually a lot more fun?
Right. Yeah. No, like I said, people love it. So and clearly, like even just a lot of my content is just posting competition videos from a good angle. Like if you get a good camera angle of some of this stuff, it's just so rarely seen. People are captivated by it. So it's like, I think that's part of it, in my opinion. Like I've done well getting videos to go viral, and I think it has a lot to do with the camera angle. And like if you watch sometimes I feel like the competitions that are aired on TV, it's hard for me to watch them.
Yes,
because they'll sit there and they'll change angles, or they might be on the back side of the guy, and they're not the axe. They can't even see the axe going into the wood. And I'm like, so sometimes I'd like to kind of be able to help out in that way, where I can say, hey, this is what's worked for me. And I've tried different, I've got to, with TikTok, you kind of can just throw anything up there. So I've tried.
Well, it seems like you could throw a GoPro. Like as I know some of the videos when you do like the speed climbing, and I want to talk about that because it looks, to your point, the way it's filmed and the way I see it, it looks super gnarly. It's like, how high is this person climbing?
Yeah.
But it brings almost like a hyper awareness to a sport or something like that. Like when you're doing those speed climbs, because it's like, this is surreal. Like I can climb a tree, but I can't climb a telephone pole like that. It's just awesome.
Yeah. And I think that's where you get people recognizing what's really going on. Because if it's from the wrong angle, people are like, oh, he's just swinging an axe.
Yeah.
But if you see it from the right angle with the right quality, and you're seeing the precision that's going in,
right, while standing on another piece of wood stuck into the tree as you're climbing.
Yeah, exactly. Like then you're going, okay. Like I think that will help gain the exposure. And then for me, the sport, like I said, just growing the sport, I think for in general is to get more money in the sport for athletes that aren't in the top 10. I mean, there's the top 10 athletes have some opportunities to win money. They can travel and do well. There's just like below that, there's just like next to none. I mean, even me, like I'll travel 40. A good example is recently, last summer I traveled like 40 hours round trip driving to a competition. I won like $150.
Wow.
There was no climbing involved in that. It's just chopping and sawing. But like that's me. Like I'm not saying like I'm great, but I'm saying like I'm someone that's recognized as someone that makes this my life. Obviously, I find other ways to make money in the sport while doing working for lumberjack shows and stuff. But so it's like, I think that's where there needs to just be more incentive for those like kind of middle ranked athletes. And then also more access to the sport, even speed climbing. Like there's nowhere to train for speed climbing. You could, if you wanted to try it out the way we do it, you'd have to come to one of the lumberjack show sites or one of the competition sites and have someone meet you there. And you know what I mean? Like there's no place where you can just go and train. So like I've trying to think of ideas of where can you let people really try this sport. The chopping is a little tougher because it's so dangerous. I mean, the speed climbing is too, but I can see ways around making that safe. But and we make chopping as safe as we can. We have guards for our feet and our legs and stuff, but I still think people are still terrified because you're swinging an axe near your feet for like, at least for the underhand chop. People kind of get freaked out by that. So I think the chopping is a little hard to just introduce to anybody, but I think getting people closer to the sport in some way, shape, or form would be best.
When the in the middle of the pandemic first started, like we're all gyms are closed and all that stuff. I actually reached out to a company called ChopFit, which is like the axe. It's got a different weight to it. It's all the workouts are all very calisthenic based, whether it's squats or swings and overheads and how you grip it and stuff, which obviously you're familiar with. But the reason I did it is because I love yard work, and I've always loved splitting the wood for the firewood or the bonfire, or just chopping trees down and picking them up and reenacting scenes from Commando. Like I've always loved the idea of using the yard as like kind of your workout, right? And so I was drawn to it just because it's like this is a safe way to get the fundamentals down of swinging a proper axe and doing it while doing it in a safe environment as opposed to me cutting my chins and stuff. So again, that's another thing where it's like to see that out there in mainstream. And I know UFC champions use the chop fit as a training tool too. So it's, again, I wish there was more being done. I think as you put more content out and keep being who you are, eventually the right person's going to see that, whether it's a producer or someone, be like, hold on, there's something here. Because even the reality TV shows like Axemen, I think that's what it's called. I'm just fascinated by it because it's like this is pure drama of literally a tree could fall and kill, or it's just the idea of being a lumberjack, early roots of like Paul Bunyan, like all these tall tales. It's like there is something really pure about it. I think there is drama in that.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I mean, if you would have followed me around, for the last, I've been doing it. This is going to be my 19th season being involved in the sport. I mean, there's definitely been some trauma, definitely a lot of injuries. I've seen some gnarly stuff for sure. And just, I mean, to get into the mind of a competitor shooting for a world title, at the world championships or steel, and just what it takes. I mean, it's a lot. I mean, to be the top athletes in this sport, you've got to be obsessed. You got to dedicate a lot of time and a lot of money.
You mentioned recovering from an injury, but when it comes to like competitions, like, and I know you've recently posted about these new mushrooms you take for recovery and stuff. But when it comes to like that type of stuff, do you like ice baths, cold water treatment? Like, how do you recover from a competition in terms of like you're not just drinking water and Gatorade. Like obviously you're sore. Your muscle groups are all effed up after competition. So how do you kind of recover yourself to get ready for training the next time?
You know, when I got involved in it with lumberjack shows, the recovery wasn't taken very seriously. It was
of course. I mean, why
normally
would it?
light beer?
Mountain Dew and a Slim Jim.
Yeah. But I mean, I would say in the last, like I said, 5 or so years. I'm 30, gonna be 34. So I started taking, my recovery and stuff a little more seriously. I personally don't do ice baths and stuff like that right now. I think it would be great. I've looked into some stuff about getting a good ice bath. I think it would be beneficial. I know there's good benefits to all that. So I thought about trying to arrange that in the future because I have had some injuries with my ankles and stuff. I just had surgery to remove some bone spurs back in January, so I'm still kind of recovering from that. For me, I think the mobility of it, especially I think especially it depends on what event too. Sometimes that's kind of drastically different. Like as a speed climber, I think all the joints are there. That sport is very hard on all your joints, and, ankles, knees, your hips, my hips. Like, I mean, like I can feel them grinding, if I'm if I'm not on top of it. I go to kind of test what I can do. I'm tight. So it's like, I think taking care of your joints and your mobility is crucial to longevity in the sport.
In terms of like the injuries and stuff, for especially the speed climb, you talk about the pads, like the
Yes,
sawdust and all that.
yeah. So I guess I was just getting to the point where, like, if you lose control and fell to the bottom of the pole back in the day, it was pretty bad. And then even when they started making pads, they weren't like perfect, and people were, I know a couple people that broke their backs. I've never seen it happen, but I know a couple people have broken their backs from just hard falls, because it's a race back to the pad.
Right.
So, when people get to that point where they're racing for a world title or trying to get into the finals, they kind of let it loose coming down. And if they lose control and they don't land right, they're usually in trouble. Now, it depends on where you compete, but like at the world championships, when we're doing a 60 and 90, the pads are pretty good. So now, in my opinion, if the pads are decent, most of your bad injuries now are going to happen on the pole before you hit the pad. With, like you said, a gaff getting put into the tree when you weren't prepared for it. So basically, like we use our rope to like control ourselves and like take the kind of weight off the rest of our body and like use it as like a brake. And when we're coming in with our gaffs, if we're doing it right, they should just kind of barely click the tree and roll out. And you should just be real loose with it. You're not trying to like jam it back into the tree. You're just trying to like brush the tree for a legal climb. So you're trying to just stay in control. And then like, even if like, so we have to put a gaff in each section on the way down. We have to legally. So to make it a legal climb. So sometimes you see us like turn to our side because we lose control, which is kind of a safe way if you're losing control, because you kind of eliminate your legs and you can kind of just lean on your rope, but you still got to put gaffs in to make a legal climb. So you'll see us putting gaffs in like underneath our leg, like kind of sitting sideways. So we make it a legal climb. So a lot of injuries happen is if like you get into a bad rope position, like if you get hung up or you slip and you don't have control of your rope and your rope gets low. So then all of a sudden your gaffs come back to the tree. Like that's how I injured my ankles. I had some equipment failure the first time, and I was kind of had to walk down the pole, and then I went to go just jump to the pad, but I kind of just had my rope lazily in front of me, and the gaff went into the tree. I was trying to hit the pad, but my leg was too close to the pole, and the gaff went into the tree and just cranked my ankle over. And another time I was in a 60-foot race, and I hit the top line, and I went to adjust my rope, and it came out of one of my hands.
Ugh.
So then I was kind of like smashed against the tree coming down and was hitting my gaffs pretty hard on the way down. And that's when I fractured my other ankle. But yeah, so like that's when you're not ready, or if you're losing control on the way down and those gaffs come back to the tree, is when you're in trouble.
How do you say this is a big world championship and you got a bunch of stuff going on? Like, can you kind of talk me through what your day is when you wake up that morning through the first event? Like, how do you kind of get ready for this?
So yeah, basically you start off depending on what competition and what time, they all happen differently, but basically you get there with enough time to see, you go and you see what heat you're in, what stand you're on or what pole you're on. And then you start prepping your equipment, like I'll have all my climbing equipment, my rope, my gear all out, sitting next to the climbing area, have that ready to go. You know, a lot of times we soak our ropes in water to stiffen them up. So I kind of make sure that's prepped in the way I want it. And then I will, as it gets closer to the event for climbing, I'll get my rope around the tree, or if I'm not in that heat, I'll at least kind of get it set up to where I want maybe if I have some grip tape or something on the rope, and then we put tape on the back side of our rope. We actually put electrical tape backwards.
Okay.
So the sticky side's out, so it helps grip on the way up, and then it burns off on the way down. So anyway, there's a lot of prep in that, prep for the climbing equipment already. If you're log rolling, you got your log rolling corks and stuff out. And then for chopping, there's a lot more prep as far as finding which block is yours. There's a block draw. You have to be there usually at a certain time to get your block. And then you go and grab an open stand and you set it out and you start drawing your lines. You have to put nails in, slab nails, so that you can't slab
Yep.
the whole block off. You know, so that's part of it. That's part of the rules too. So you kind of get your lines drawn, you get it all set up. And if you're not in that first heat, then you take your block off and kind of set it off to the side. And you do the same thing for the underhand. You got to cut your footholds, which are the flat spots, the one that we stand on top of the log and chop between our feet. You got to get those footholds set and get that kind of ready. Springboard, when we're doing the springboard pulls, you're marking out your pockets, getting those set. If your pull is ready to go, sometimes you have to kind of wait. If there's multiple heats and your tree's not even up, that you kind of have to leave that alone until your pull's ready, and then you can go mark your pockets depending on what heat you're in. And then you're testing axes if you can, or sharpening axes. You're getting your handle on your single buck saw, kind of getting that prepped. There's not any prep for the single buck really. As far as like the block, they kind of just have that set when you go and kind of set it up right before the event. But get your handle on there, get that ready, get it out of the box and stuff. You normally have some saw and corks you're gonna have ready. Then if you're running a hot saw, you got to get your hot saw tuned up. Get your bar and your chain on there and get that all set, and maybe even warm it up in the morning and make sure everything's running right, because most of the time those things don't run.
Right.
So yeah, and then just kind of having your own little schedule there and going, okay, starting with standing, but this is my schedule for the day. Everyone kind of has their own schedule, because you're drawing your different heats and you signed up for different events, but you're kind of like, okay, all my equipment is ready for that. And it's when I'm done with standing block, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to get ready to get my climbing equipment on and stuff like that. So you're just kind of trying to get real organized. And the better you get and the farther you advance in the sport, the
Right.
easier that becomes, but the more prepared you are. Like, there's still competitions where I'm running around like a chicken with my head cut off.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And when it comes to the actual training for a competition, like how do you decide, is one day speed climbing, one day is axe work, one day is whatever? Like, how do you kind of break that up? Because it seems like some of these competitions, there's so much going on that you really can't afford to not train a certain aspect each week, correct?
Yeah. So I think it would be better if I've thought about trying to do something like that, where like, okay, this week I'm single bucking. I haven't ever really had a perfect schedule of any of that. A lot of times for me, it's like, what is my weakness? And I'm going to try to work on that.
Gotcha.
I think there's times where I overtrain, but so it's like, you always want to keep cutting and keep training, but sometimes it's like, if I'm cutting good standing blocks right now, but my underhands are crap, I should start cutting underhands and start focusing on that and kind of let my standing block be. I've got some muscle memory there. I'm good. Leave it alone for a little bit and
there's definitely
start
some
focusing on what you're doing wrong in these other events and try to break those bad habits.
So when it comes to like the grip stuff or like swinging something or cutting something, it seems like that is a perishable skill if you don't maintain some level of practice with that, correct?
Yeah, but I think it comes naturally with what you're doing. I've noticed like I've got some pain in my hands from all it. So I've recently, kind of like I said, in the last few years, just paying attention to recovery in general, I've recently kind of wanted to try to get some grip strengtheners, because I think so yeah, you know what, you're absolutely right with all this stuff. Like, there could be so much more time into it, right? But I think it comes down to like, again, how much am I getting back from this sport? So like if there was more money into it, I think all of us athletes would give more time to all of that, right? So
Right.
sometimes I think that has a factor in it where it's like I could spend all day in
Right.
recovery, but
It's like,
I gotta work my normal job, right? Like I'm like, so it's like that's what it comes down
and
to. But
that's what I
yeah, so there could be a
love.
lot more recovery.
I've had a bunch of the championship like arm wrestlers on the podcast, and like you guys, they do these competitions, but they're either working the oil wells or they're ranch hands or
Okay.
like they have the other jobs. And it's like the
Yeah,
interesting thing I find with that is you have to compete at such a high level in your sport, but you also have to pay your bills, do your job. You have
yeah,
issues at home, you have a
yeah,
sick kid or a wife, or your car broke down. It's like I'm always fascinated by the human spirit to kind of push through that stuff because you're not a LeBron James, where you're the number one in the world,
yeah,
and you just
yeah,
focus. This is your sport, this is your hobby, your life, your career. You have these other stuff you're juggling, and to still be at the level you're at and keep pushing higher. Like there is something really unique and awesome about that.
yeah, yeah. Thanks. And like I'm not even really giving myself that much credit because I don't have any kids or nothing.
Right?
Um, but yeah, I mean, there's people with kids, and I mean, there's lawyers, and
Yeah.
people with real real jobs in the sport. And I mean, I've always juggled real jobs too. I mean, don't get me wrong, I've done a lot of stuff, but from construction to well drilling to
Yeah.
landscaping to yeah, so I've done a bunch of stuff. But my goal recently has been to figure out a way to make money uh, with the sport through social media and stuff like that. So I honestly, because I want to give it more time. So I'm kind of stubborn. I don't have any kids, so I can kind of
Yeah. Of course.
do that. Where I want to make a living doing what I love. It kills me to get a normal job, and I do. I mean, I work part time right now, serving tables and stuff, and but yeah. So I would say that's the goal, is to not have to juggle that, so I can give it the more time.
Right.
But yeah, like so for instance, this summer I'm actually leaving in a couple weeks. I'm driving up to Alaska to work for the Great Alaskan Lumberjack Show, and I'll be doing shows there all summer long. I'll have to fly back for some competitions.
I saw that in 2019. I was up there.
Oh,
I was up there
cool.
with a band. We did the Alaskan State Fair.
Oh,
Uh,
I've done that the last 2 years. The
Okay,
lumberjack show
yeah.
there.
So we saw part of that show up there. Again, I'm just like this.
Did you see it at the state fair then?
Yes.
Okay. So that's like a 3 week event.
Okay.
Or right. We're there
Yeah.
every day of the
Okay.
fair.
And I was just like,
And they've been
this is.
doing
I
that for
want to
like,
watch this. Screw the show. Screw the concert. Screw this other
yeah.
crap. I want to watch these like literally barbaric. Just it was awesome. I love that.
Yeah, no, people love that Alaska State Fair. That show's been there for 20 something years at the state fair. So that's a pretty cool kind of a legendary show to do. But the one I'll be working for is in Ketchikan, Alaska, which is the southeast corner, and it's on the inside passage where the cruise ships come through.
Okay.
We actually do shows for cruise ship passengers they start in April and they go through October.
Yep.
And so yeah, again, that was kind of leading back to like that's how I'm making money in the sport. Because I still not, like, yeah, because otherwise I would have to get a different job here. So that's why I'm trying to not have to work those lumberjack shows full time in the
Right.
future, if I can kind of put more focus on social media and stuff, and
Yeah.
then
Of
being able to
course.
just any traveling I do would be mainly for professional competitions, and then I like filling in and doing a couple weeks here and there, but I'd
Yeah. Of
rather not do a
course.
full season anymore. So
Well, it seems like the social media is the best way to get out there in the mainstream eyes because the way I mean, TikTok has a lot of faults, obviously, but when
yeah,
you focus on like the really cool people, the or the brands that are doing some really cool stuff, I never would have. I thought watching this stuff on ESPN2 at 2 in the morning was the last time I ever see it, unless I go to YouTube to watch it. But now you go on TikTok and
yeah,
follow someone like you and be
yeah.
like, oh shit, people are actually still watching this live. People are still competing. Like I think there's something is really beneficial to social media, and I think following your stuff is just a hoot.
Yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate you saying that. And I'm glad, it kind of just started on during COVID, just started posting some videos and they started going viral. So me and another friend of mine, Mark Boquin, so just kept posting, and
Yeah.
it's been great to give the sport that exposure. I mean, the numbers we have together, me and him, are just just astronomical. I mean, we've got hundreds of millions of views throughout our platforms, which is pretty cool.
Now, you've mentioned kind of like the rules and regulations, but is there like an international governing body that, like, how do you determine when a new season starts, if you even call it that? Are there rules that change, or like laws, bylaws that get adopted? Like like who votes on certain stuff? Like you can't do this, or this speed pole has to be this high or this short. Like how do you,
Yeah.
like who oversees that?
So it's like there's like the American Lumberjack
Okay.
Association. And that's like West Coast comps, I think. So there's different associations that would like kind of that would host um certain competitions. So basically, yeah, I guess it depends on where you go. Like if I go out west, we're gonna, I guess I'm trying to think exactly how it works, but like basically, like there's a can log, that's an association where you're going to follow these rules if you're at these competitions.
Gotcha.
Or I'm in it's called NISA, like the New York Lumberjack Association. Like this is a NISA competition, so you're going to follow them, and they're all basically the same, but there's different stuff to it for sure. Different rules. Again, it is basically the same, and it should be. That's sometimes the problem. Like for speed climbing, especially, there's only like 5 competitions, but it's like it's different out west than it is. There's different rules. There's slightly different rules and stuff. And but so then there's like the Steel Timbersports series, which is the biggest and basically most prestigious competition and the only televised competition at the moment. It used to be on ESPN and now it's on CBS Sports. There's an athlete advisory board and I think and then another group called the Granite State that kind of help rank all the athletes. So for that, that particular competition, anybody can apply, I guess. You can fill out an application and turn it in, and you submit your times for the 6 events that are in the Steel Timbersports series, which is the underhand chop, the standing block chop, the springboard chop, and then the single buck, hot saw, and stock saw. And for that's just like its own little competition. That's the Steel Timbersports series rules is what you're going to follow if you're in that competition. And the same thing goes for like the Lumberjack World Championships. I don't think that's in an association. That just has its own rules
Gotcha.
for the Lumberjack World Championship. So it just depends. They're basically the same though. I mean, it's nothing too crazy should change.
Have
Other
you
than
ever,
climbing is a little different.
right? And have you ever had to deal with like protesters who are like, you're killing trees or you're part of the problem? Like, how do you, like, has that ever come up?
It comes up a lot on social media, but I haven't
Oh
had
God.
to. Yeah, I haven't had to fight it. Or I haven't seen any people never at competitions and stuff like that.
Such a fascinating, it's because obviously the big thing for when it comes to like people, and this obviously probably more geared towards the actual lumberjacks or the foresting industry, but the idea that, yeah, I'm sad when forests go down, but there's also a lot of benefits why some stuff gets cleared out for regrowth and stuff like that. And I think people hijack this idea, or they attach themselves to people that are, man, I'm just chopping a piece of wood. That like what do you? I'm not here to cure the world, and it's just like I hate when people hijack that stuff.
Yeah, so it's funny because a lot of the people that are involved in the sport have like forestry degrees and
Right.
went to
So
school for forestry and like know more and care more about the environment than the people that are complaining. And yeah, it's all in, you know, how do I want to say it? Like, I mean, it's all managed, appropriately, or there are certain plantations that are grown for this too, so it's like we're not just going out and just clear cutting forest for our competition, and it's all gathered in a sustainable way.
when it comes to international competitions, or not, that maybe I don't know if you've been overseas yet, but when other people in the world come together and do an event, when it comes to their training, obviously the wood's different there, right? Like, do
Yeah.
they have to? Is it how does someone train? Say you were going to Germany for some crazy competition and they have a specific wood there. How do you get access to that wood? Or do you have to find something similar to train with that with your gear?
Yeah, that's a good question. So Yeah, basically the gear is drastically changed. Like
Yeah.
even when I go to Canada, in the States, we saw and chop a lot of softwood, like white pine and
Yeah.
aspen. And then when we go out, when I in British Columbia, Canada, when I competed
Oh
there,
yeah.
their sawwood was Doug fir, which is a hardwood. So I wouldn't even use my same saw. So speaking of like how expensive the sport is, like the saw I spent $2,500 on, I can't use it at that competition because it's not filed. It would ruin that saw basically. So yeah, for one, it's like there's different ways to train. I mean, I have like a trainer saw that I would probably put through anything. I'm not going to run it through anything horrible like
Yeah.
that, but I can run it through a little rougher wood, and if it's dry white pine, I'll put it through that and get my endurance. That's basically that was for that event. That's basically the difference. Chopping's a little different. You do want to practice with some harder wood for sure. Like when you go to the Sydney Royal Easter Show, is a competition in Sydney, Australia, and it is one of the biggest wood chopping competitions in the world. It's like a 12-day event, and it's just chopping and sawing. No
Wow.
hot saws. It's just chopping and sawing. And but it's all hardwood over there. So you got to have different axes to cut that hardwood. So even though you got a dozen axes here in the States that cut soft white pine, you got to get different axes or ground differently to hold up and cut that wood well and efficiently. And people break axes. You go over there and you're breaking axes and stuff because it's hardwood. And so yeah, I think it's more. I think the concern is more on getting the gear that's going to cut that wood, and then of course you do want to adjust your training if you're going to go cut hardwood for sure. But
Right.
I think it's if you can get kind of some tougher wood to train with, that's not such a big deal, but or big of a challenge. But I think it's gathering a whole nother set of equipment to cut that wood.
Right. Man, it's so
It's just
fascinating.
expensive.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like when you have to travel, you have to bring all that stuff with you. It's just like
Yeah.
I guess I never realized. I just figured that you guys would just show up in a truck and get out of there and start swinging. It's like there's so much that goes into this.
Yeah, like yeah, if you can drive, great. But
Yeah,
sometimes
but
it's too far, and it's like so you're gonna fly, but then there's challenges to that. And
right.
I mean, I haven't tried to mail a hot saw, but those hot saws, I mean, mine's a little cheaper, it's a little smaller, but I mean, still I got like $6,000 into this hot saw. I know the ones that they're running, some of those other guys are running are 10 grand. And you got to figure out how to mail that to your competition. You got to empty out the gas, and I don't even know.
Trust that it even
You got
makes
to
it
piece it
there.
apart. I mean, you
Right.
can take some of it with you, but I think the motor head, I think it has to be empty of fuel, and you got to ship it. And there's guys that have done it, and they don't seem stressed about it, but that sounds like a nightmare. So a lot of times I'm like this summer, I'm trying to coordinate a saw that I can borrow from somebody because I'm going to be up in Alaska and I'm going to fly down to these three competitions. So I'm going to try to coordinate that back here in the States, and I'm going to leave my comp saw, my single buck saw, like I'm going to leave some comp gear here with a buddy who's going to bring it to the comp, and I'll just bring my training gear up there. So yeah, a lot of logistics where you're trying to like figure out, especially if you're going to be traveling from far away. And like my friend actually that I'm referring to, he's going to Sydney, Australia at the end of this week.
Wow.
And he has some gear lined up over there, some axes that are going to cut that hardwood, and he's flying with a single buck saw. He's going to fly with that. I've flown with saws, and then those springboards, the boards you put into the springboard, you got to fly with those because you want those clips are kind of designed a certain way. It's a lot of stuff. Axes aren't so bad. What comes the problem is the weight. So if you can't drive, unfortunately, you're probably not just you're going to be limited. You got to kind of know,
right,
you're going to have to leave some stuff behind if you're going to fly with all your gear. It's hard to bring a dozen axes.
Yeah, no, I hear you. But man, this has been awesome. And
yeah, man, I appreciate it.
Before I let you go, let people know your TikTok page, Instagram, if they want to send you messages to check out what you're doing.
Yeah,
what's the best avenue to do that?
Appreciate it, man. Yeah, it's just Turbo Tom Lancaster across all platforms. Actually, super easy. On Instagram and TikTok, and then then YouTube as well. Yeah, YouTube. They're all Turbo Tom Lancaster. I guess Facebook is just Thomas Lancaster, but If you
you
look
do
up
the,
Turbo
you do
Tom, you're
your
gonna find me on most platforms.
and you do your tubular 10-minute podcast too on YouTube channel,
Yeah,
correct?
yeah. I'm just kind of messing around with that. I got a buddy, two friends that I'm doing a podcast with as well. And
Yep.
then I was just trying to start that to keep up with some questions. And I kind of liked this format. So that is actually available on Spotify and Apple Music. I'm gonna put it on Google Podcast as
Yeah.
well. So any updates on that is on social media. And that is just Turbo Tom's podcast. I think I'm dropping the totally tubular.
No, all good, man.
I do
And
want to
what
keep it at 10 minutes just because, for one, editing and all that stuff, it's nice if I can kind of like hop on and answer some questions and
yeah, of
eventually
course.
maybe once I have a little more time, do some longer ones. But
No,
yeah, so yeah, Turbo Tom's podcast. I think all the links I'm gonna try. I think you can basically find
yeah.
it all on my social media. But yeah, Turbo Tom on everything.
It's cool to see you're a champion of your sport, and I think if one of these days it's gonna break, it's to be awesome when people finally realize how cool what you guys do. So again, thank you
Thanks.
for your time.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you having me, and yeah, best of luck with all you do. And yeah, if you have anything you want me to share, let me know. I'll share it on my stuff for sure.
Awesome. Thank you, sir.
All right, thanks, man. Have a
Yep.
good one.
Oh, hello. I'm just enjoying this nice fucking candle. Anyways, I'm John, the host of Spear Talk, and I want to talk to you about nice fucking candles. We are lucky to have Nice Fucking Candles as a sponsor of the podcast. And if you use code SpearTalk15, you get 15% off your first order, or use the affiliate link below to always get your candle needs through Nice Fucking Candles. Nice Fucking Candles are 100% soy wax. They have a 65-hour burn time, maybe more if you nurse the flame a little bit. Maybe, I don't know, I'm not an expert on flames or candles, but I will say these things burn a long fucking time. You ask me about the wick, it's a double wick for even burning, which is amazing. And they come in 3 incredible flavors. I'm not sure if you're going to be eating these candles, but if you do like them, the scents are eucalyptus and ginseng, tobacco and fireside, and seaside and driftwood. Once again, Nice Fucking Candles. They are the candle company for Spear Talk. And if you love candles and need a good scent to clear out your office, your room, your podcast room, your weight room, your whatever you're doing in a room that smells like crap, use this candle. It's amazing. Thank you. Check them out. Love Nice Fucking Candles.